Dead soil shouldn't come back to life in 3 days, yet here it is, black, cracked dirt turning soft, dark, and alive like it never died. A handful of charcoal just rewrote the rules of what dead soil means. Picture this: you scoop up a handful of earth that looks more like dust than soil. It doesn't hold water, it doesn't smell like anything. No worms, no structure, just lifeless particles slipping through your fingers. Most people would walk away and call it finished. But that assumption is the first mistake, because soil doesn't die the way we think it does, and this changes everything. What you're looking at isn't dead soil, it's empty soil, stripped, exhausted, starved of life, and the difference between dead and empty is exactly where this entire story begins. A farmer once described his land the same way: dead, crops failing, water disappearing within seconds, fertilizer doing nothing, every season worse than the last. Kept adding more inputs, more chemicals, more effort. Nothing worked, until he stopped trying to feed the plants and started rebuilding the soil itself. That shift sounds small. It is, because plants don't grow from soil, they grow from life inside the soil, and that life had disappeared. But here where it gets interesting. That same soil, after being mixed with crushed charcoal and a bit of organic matter, began changing fast. Within days it held moisture. Within weeks it supported growth. Within months it outperformed the surrounding land. So what actually happened? Was it the charcoal, or something deeper? Let's strip it down. Charcoal, specifically what's called biochar, is not fertilizer. It doesn't directly feed plants. It doesn't add nutrients in any meaningful way. So why does it work? Because it solves a more fundamental problem. Structure. Most degraded soil fails not because nutrients are missing, but because nothing can stay. Water drains too fast. Nutrients leach away. Microbes have nowhere to live. It's like trying to build a city on sand. You can dump resources all day, but nothing sticks, and biochar changes that. At a microscopic level, charcoal is full of tiny pores, millions of them. Think of it like a sponge made of carbon. These pores trap water, hold nutrients, and most importantly, they create shelter. Shelter for microbes, and microbes are the real engine of soil. Without them, nothing cycles, nothing transforms. Nothing grows sustainably, but here's the part most people miss. Just adding charcoal alone won't magically fix your soil. In fact, if you do it wrong, it can make things worse. Fresh charcoal is like an empty apartment building. Plenty of space but no residents. If you put it into soil without charging it first, it can actually absorb nutrients from the soil temporarily, making plants struggle even more. That's not a theory, that's exactly what happens. So what's the missing step? You don't just add biochar, you activate it, and that's where the real transformation begins. The process is simple, but the logic behind it is powerful. You mix crushed charcoal with organic material, compost, manure, even kitchen waste, and let it sit. Why? Because microbes move in. They colonize those tiny pores. They settle, multiply, and build a living network inside the charcoal itself. Now you're not adding empty carbon, you're adding a microbial habitat. And that's a completely different game. Once that goes into the soil, something subtle but critical happens. Water starts staying longer, nutrients stop disappearing, microbial life stabilizes, and suddenly the soil begins to behave like soil again. Not dust, not dirt, soil. But that raises a bigger question. If this is so effective, why isn't everyone doing it? Simple answer: it doesn't fit the system. Modern agriculture is built around quick inputs and predictable outputs. Fertilizers, pesticides, controlled cycles. Biochar doesn't give instant visible results like chemicals do. It works on systems, not symptoms. And systems take time. That's not attractive to industries built on selling solutions every season. But here's the irony. Ancient civilizations were already doing this. The Amazon rainforest, specifically areas known as terra preta, contains some of the most fertile soil on Earth, and it wasn't natural, it was engineered. Indigenous communities mixed charcoal, organic waste, and soil hundreds, sometimes thousands of years ago. And that soil is still fertile today. Let that sink in. Centuries, not seasons. That's not improvement, that's permanence. So when someone says, "This sounds too simple," they're missing the point. Simple doesn't mean weak, it means fundamental. And fundamentals are what most modern systems ignore. Now let's bring this back to reality. You don't need a rainforest. You don't need ancient knowledge. You don't need complicated setups. You need three things: charcoal, organic matter, time. That's it. Start with clean charcoal, no chemicals, no additives. Crush it into small pieces, not powder but not chunks either. Then mix it with compost or manure. Even soaking it in compost tea or urine works. Let it sit for a few days. That's the charging phase. And yes, this is where your 72 hours claim comes from. Because within that time, microbial activity begins colonizing the charcoal. It's not fully mature yet, but it's alive. And alive is what matters. Then you mix it into your soil. not too deep, not too shallow, and then you wait. But here, where expectations need a reality check, you might see changes quickly: better moisture, slight plant response. But full transformation, that takes longer, weeks, months. And if someone promises instant miracles beyond that, they're either simplifying too much or selling you something. But here's the twist. Even the early changes are enough to shift the trajectory, because once soil starts improving, it compounds. More microbes, right arrow; better structure, right arrow; more water retention, right arrow; more plant growth, right arrow; more organic matter, right arrow; even more microbes. It becomes a feedback loop, and that's when things accelerate. So the real power of this method isn't speed, it's direction. You're not forcing growth, you're restoring a system. And systems, once fixed, don't need constant intervention. They sustain themselves. But let's be honest, most people won't do this, not because it's hard, but because it requires a mindset shift, from control to support, from feeding plants to feeding soil. And that's uncomfortable if you're used to quick fixes. But if you actually care about long-term results, real resilience, not temporary growth, then ignoring this is just short-sighted. There's no hack here, no shortcut, just a better understanding of how things actually work. So the next time you look at dead soil, don't ask how to revive the plants. Ask a better question: what's missing beneath them? Because once you fix that, everything above it changes. And maybe the bigger question is this: if something as simple as charcoal can rebuild an entire ecosystem from the ground up, what else have we been overlooking this whole time? Dead soil shouldn't come back to life in 3 days, but when you break it open after 72 hours, it smells like rain again. And that smell is not random. That smell is life returning. Most people ignore this part. They look at soil and judge it by color or texture. Dry means dead, dark means healthy. That's surface level thinking, because real soil health is invisible, and that's where things get uncomfortable. You can't fix what you don't understand, so let's go deeper. When you added that activated charcoal into the soil, you didn't just improve structure, you triggered a biological reaction. Microbes didn't just settle, they multiplied. And once they start multiplying, they don't stay passive. They begin breaking things down. Organic matter turns into nutrients. Locked minerals become available. Fungal networks start connecting root systems. It's not just improvement, it's coordination. And this is where most people completely underestimate what's happening. Plants are not independent organisms, they are part of a network. Roots release sugars, literally feeding microbes in the soil. In return, microbes unlock nutrients the plant can't access alone. It's a trade, a system, and when soil is dead, that system collapses. But here's the part that should make you rethink everything. Biochar doesn't just support that system, it stabilizes it. Without structure, microbial populations spike and crash constantly. One dry day and they die off. One heavy rain and nutrients wash away. It's chaos. Biochar reduces that chaos. Those tiny pores we talked about, they don't just hold water, they create microenvironments, protected zones where microbes survive extreme conditions, so even when the surface dries out, life underneath continues, and that continuity is what builds resilience. But here, where it gets even more interesting, not all microbes do the same job. Some break down organic matter, some fix nitrogen, some protect plants from disease, and when you introduce biochar, you're not choosing which microbes show up. You're allowing diversity to return. That diversity is what makes soil strong, not a single super microbe, a balanced ecosystem. And that's something fertilizers can't replicate. They feed plants directly, but they bypass the system, which is why over time soil becomes more dependent, not less. But let's be brutally honest, this method still fails for a lot of people. And it's not because biochar doesn't work, it's because they miss the context. They treat it like a magic ingredient instead of part of a process. If your soil has zero organic matter, biochar alone won't fix it. If you don't maintain moisture, microbes won't survive. If you keep using harsh chemicals, you'll kill the very life you're trying to build. This isn't plug and play, it's system repair, and systems require consistency. But once you get that right, the changes become obvious. Soil starts clumping instead of falling apart. Water doesn't disappear instantly, it soaks in and stays. Plants don't just grow, they stabilize. Leaves become richer in color, roots go deeper. And here, the key shift: you stop reacting to problems, because the problems stop showing up as often. But that raises a harder question. If this approach is more stable, more sustainable, why do people still rely on chemical-heavy methods? The answer isn't technical, it's behavioral. Fast results are addictive. You apply fertilizer, plants respond quickly. You spray pesticides, problems disappear instantly. It feels effective, but it creates dependency. Each season, the soil gets weaker. So you need more input, more cost, more effort. It's a loop. Biochar breaks that loop but not immediately, and that delay is enough to turn most people away, because they're optimizing for speed, not stability. And that's a trade-off you need to be honest about. Do you want fast growth today or consistent growth for years? You don't get both at the same level. Now let's zoom out for a second. This isn't just about gardening, this is about how systems recover. Whether it's soil, health, or even business, the pattern is the same. When something collapses, people look for quick fixes, add more inputs, push harder, but real recovery doesn't come from adding more, it comes from restoring what's missing. And in soil, what's missing is almost always life. Biochar just creates the conditions for life to return. That's it, no magic, no mystery, just a better environment. And better environments produce better outcomes. But here's something most people never test. What happens after 1 season, 2 seasons, 3? This is where biochar separates itself from everything else. It doesn't break down quickly. It stays, years, sometimes decades. So every improvement you make stacks. You're not starting from zero each season. You're building on top of what already exists, and that compounding effect is what turns average soil into highly productive soil over time, but only if you stay consistent. And that's the real barrier, not knowledge, not resources, consistency, because this method rewards patience. And patience is rare, so here's the uncomfortable truth. If you try this once, expect results in a week, and then quit, you'll conclude it doesn't work, and you'll be wrong. But if you treat it like a system, observe, adjust, repeat, you'll start seeing something most people never experience. Soil that improves on its own, less intervention, fewer problems, more stability. And at that point, you're not really gardening anymore, you're managing an ecosystem. And ecosystems, when healthy, don't need constant fixing, they regulate themselves. So maybe the real takeaway isn't about charcoal at all. It's about how easily we overlook foundational fixes because they don't look dramatic, they don't feel urgent, they don't promise instant transformation, but they work quietly, consistently, powerfully, and once you see that, you can't unsee it. So the next time you're tempted to fix a problem by adding more on top, pause and ask something better. Is the system broken or just unsupported? Because if it's the second one, then the solution might already be simpler than you think. And if that's true for soil, where else have you been solving the wrong problem this entire time? So here's the part nobody tells you. Sometimes the soil looks better, but nothing actually changes. Leaves stay pale, growth stays slow. You followed every step. Charcoal, compost, water, and still nothing impressive. That's where most people quietly give up. And honestly, that's where the real lesson begins, because if biochar works and it does, then failure isn't random. It's diagnostic. Something is still missing. But what? Let's strip away the assumptions. First mistake, thinking all charcoal is equal. It's not. If you're using charcoal that still contains chemicals, lighter fluid residue, or industrial additives, you're not improving soil. You're contaminating it, and the effects are subtle. No dramatic failure, just suppressed biology. Slow, invisible damage. So the rule is simple. If you wouldn't eat food cooked over it, don't put it in your soil. But that's just the surface problem. Here's the deeper one. Most people underestimate how depleted their soil actually is. They think adding one good thing should fix everything. That's not how systems work. If your soil has been stripped for years, low organic matter, poor microbial life, compacted structure, then biochar is just one piece, not the whole solution. And this changes your expectations, because now you're not fixing soil, you're rebuilding it, and rebuilding takes layers. Organic matter, moisture, protection, time. Miss one and progress slows down. But here, where it gets even more interesting. Sometimes the issue isn't what you added, it's what you didn't stop. If you're still using chemical fertilizers aggressively, you might be disrupting microbial balance faster than it can stabilize. If you're overwatering, you might be suffocating the system. If your soil is constantly exposed to harsh sun, microbes are dying at the surface faster than they can recover. In other words, you can't build life while simultaneously destroying it. Sounds obvious, but most people do exactly that. Now here's a question you probably haven't asked. What does working soil actually look like? Not theoretically, practically, because if you don't know the target, you can't measure progress. Healthy soil isn't just dark, it's structured. When you squeeze it, it holds shape but breaks apart easily. It smells earthy, not sour, not sterile. You start seeing small signs: worms, tiny insects, fungal threads. And here's the key: water behavior changes. Instead of pooling or vanishing instantly, filtrates smoothly. That's one of the earliest real indicators. Not plant growth, soil behavior. But here, where most people get it wrong again, they keep checking the surface. And the real action is happening below. Root zones, microbial layers, moisture pockets, so they miss progress and assume failure. That impatience costs them results, but let's go deeper. There's another layer to this that almost nobody talks about. balance, not just adding good things but avoiding excess, too much biochar. You can actually disrupt soil density and nutrient balance. Too much compost, you risk overheating or creating imbalance in microbial activity. Too much water, oxygen disappears and microbes suffocate. So the goal isn't more, it's proportion, and that's where skill comes in, because no two soils are identical. Sandy soil behaves differently than clay. Dry climates behave differently than humid ones. What works fast in one place might take longer somewhere else. And if you ignore that, you'll misread the results. Now let's confront something uncomfortable. Most people don't fail because the method is wrong. They fail because they expect simplicity without attention. They want a formula, but what this actually requires is observation. Adjustment, feedback. That's not harder, it's just less convenient, but here's the payoff. Once you start paying attention, patterns emerge. You notice moisture levels changing. You notice plant resilience improving. You notice less need for constant intervention, and slowly, almost quietly, the system stabilizes. And that's when things shift from effort to momentum. But here's the part that separates casual attempts from real results. Consistency over time. One application won't transform your soil permanently, but repeated cycles, that's where compounding happens. Each time you add organic matter, each time you protect the surface, each time you support microbial life, you're stacking improvements. And stacked improvements create durability. So instead of asking, did this work in 3 days? A better question is my soil better than it was last week? Because that's the real metric. Direction, not speed, and once direction is right, speed follows naturally, but only if you stay in the process. Now step back for a second. What started as a simple idea, a handful of charcoal, has turned into something much bigger. A shift in how you think about growth itself, not forcing outcomes, but enabling conditions, not chasing results, but building systems. And if you really understand that, then this isn't just about soil anymore. It's about how everything improves, quietly, gradually, but permanently. So the next time something looks dead, don't rush to replace it. Don't pile on quick fixes. Look deeper, ask harder questions. Because sometimes the problem isn't that it's gone, it's that the foundation underneath it has been ignored for too long. And if you fix that, you don't just bring it back, you make it stronger than it ever was. Which leaves you with one final thought: if most people quit right before the system starts working, how many results are being lost just because nobody stayed long enough to see them? What looks like dead soil usually isn't dead, it's just empty. A handful of properly prepared charcoal doesn't magically grow plants. It rebuilds the system that makes growth possible. It gives water a place to stay, nutrients a place to hold, and microbes a place to live. And once that system comes back online, everything above it follows. Not instantly, not magically, but consistently. So the real takeaway is simple: stop trying to fix the surface. Fix what's underneath and let the system do the rest.